Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we've got another special video looking and targeting Sweden. Before we did some Swedish videos looking at the ground forces portion before the ground forces tech tree was released to the game. And this time we're going to be having a look at helicopters. Swedish helicopters has definitely been a topic which has been highly talked about over the last few months, mainly because it's one of those things which is seen as, well, not really there. But luckily we have blockhaj with us once again, and he's luckily made a forum post going through the possible options for Sweden. So first of all, how are you doing, blockhaj? And also, when it comes to these helicopters, what are your general feelings about the idea of Sweden doesn't have anything, or, you know, how is Sweden going to be able to create a tech tree around its general vehicles?
Well, I'm doing good, all things considered, and I'm sort of. I think this it's a cool idea because Sweden has only serviced one anti-tank helicopter ever. So this is a bunch of extremely experimental vehicles, if you will. Some of these are basically borderline alternate history. But like that's what makes it fun, at least for me as a researcher, because I have to look far and wide and look for the most weird ass sources to find something. And that's what I've done, and I'm still doing. I'm still hoping that I will find something more to add to this list. But this has been a fun experience for me, and that has just made the whole thing really interesting, even if the end result might not seem that interesting.
Well, that's always nice to hear. Like, obviously, it's good to be interested in what you're doing. So when you obviously talked about there, Sweden has only had one anti-tank helicopter. Is there any liberties, you would say, that you've taken with this list? Like, have you added, I don't know, extra armaments to specific vehicles that were maybe used by other countries? Or generally, is there anything to do with that, that you've taken on this post?
There definitely has been liberties. I have not added anything that Sweden did not have access to. So, for example, I have not added, for example, the helicopter 15, which, I mean, it can be armed, but Sweden has never armed it. So, I have not added that. But otherwise, for example, I have added the helicopter 2. It's a helicopter we never armed in service. However, we did trial an armed version prior to ordering it. So we trialed the helicopter 2. That's the Alouette II, French Alouette II. We trialed that in 58 with SS-11 missiles. And, the trials were fine. And those were the trials that made us buy the helicopter. However, when we actually got it, I think 1961, we never used it with missiles. So that's an alternate history liberty I've taken.
Well, I think most people will actually be fine with that. I think generally, I think a lot more people will be just happy that the fact that Sweden will have some kind of helicopter tree. That a lot of people have brought up the idea of recon helicopters, being used in the game. But I would rather have some, anti-tank killing capabilities. So let's have a look, or starting off with this. So we're going to simply just go through each of the helicopters, and blockhaj is going to generally talk about them. He's created a whole, proposed mainline and also some premium ones, and they all have an interesting history when it comes to Sweden. So obviously the first one you mentioned is the Helicopter 2, the French Alouette II helicopter. Is there anything you'd like to add to your comments that you just said?
Yeah, I think I mean, I think it's good if we actually go through the history of it, because my comments are very basic. So we trialed the Alouette 2 in 58, and the trials were successful. And the French obviously wanted to sell us the armed version with the SS-11s because money, money, money. And the trials were fine. If you have the thread up, if you look at pictures, I have two pictures of the 1958 trials with the SS-11s.
Yes, I see it. It looks it looks very interesting. The first picture, right?
Yeah, both of them. And then you have, if you scroll down, you will have a machine gun picture. That's another trial from 1961 when we decided to try fitting a machine gun to it. So these are, two separate trials. So this, if Gaijin would decide to implement both of these on the same vehicle, the machine gun and the SS-11s, that's extreme alternate history. However, it would be like the most ideal way gameplay wise, But we have a similar deal with the Alouette in the French tree. It has MG3s, and to my knowledge, France never had MG3s on their Alouettes, and that's a liberty Gaijin has taken, whether you like it or not. And I mean, at least we have the option here to do something similar. I mean, I'm not personally for this. I do not like these type of, magic vehicles, if you will. But the option is there. So
Yeah, I think the way to frame it, at least in my head, the way I see it is what you were trying to do here is you're trying to show all of the options, whether you agree or disagree with them. It's always nice to see all of the cards on the table, and I think this is what, at least when it comes to this, that's what it does. And you are correct. Like with the other Alouette we already have in game, or the many Alouettes, it would definitely be a very similar power level to the one which already has, the German guns and the SS-11s. And if they didn't want to do that, I mean, the fact that it was trialed with just standard 4 SS-11s, that could easily be a starter helicopter in the general trials, even if in service it wasn't given them. The next helicopter that we see is the Helicopter 3A. Is there any? So when it comes to the naming of the helicopters in Sweden, is it just a general progression of 1, 2, 3, or or is there something key to the general numbers?
so far it's just been basic numbering. So 1, 2, I think we're up to 17 now. Some numbers are project numbers. We'll get to that later. So they are numbers which are used to project a helicopter, but the designation is never used on that helicopter. But we'll get to that later. But yeah, this is the Helicopter 3. So the third one, it's a Bell 2-4. I think this one, the A model, is made in Italy, but I'm just pulling from the back of my head now. It might as well be US. The thing is, though, that when we ordered these, the US had already started to trial the SS-11s on their Bell 2-4s, Hueys. What's that designation? The AGM, whatever. And apparently that had been successful. I don't remember which conflict that was. It wasn't Vietnam. This was prior to that. But anyway, when we ordered the Helicopter 3, we ordered them with mountings for the NATO pylons, so we could arm them in the future, even if they were never intended to be armed from the start. So we ordered them with the possibility of being able to arm them in the future, just to get experience or whatever. And eventually, we did trial them with armament. We did not trial them with the SS-11s like the Americans did. We went a more unique way. We armed them with Bofors Bantam missiles, and those are, I mean, the history is complicated, but basically Bofors decided to redevelop the SS-10, which is the predecessor to the SS-11. And basically, they gave it foldable wings, a glass fiber body. I think they improved the warhead because it has more penetration, according to Bofors, than the sources I have for the SS-10. But in either case, it's basically an SS-11 for all intents and purposes that's being fired from a box. It's wire-guided, it's first generation. And we decided to trial the Helicopter 3A with 6 of them. So Tech, if you click on pictures again, you will see there is a close-up of the 3 Bantams per side. Yeah, these were designated the RB-53s in Sweden. Sweden with our very creative naming system. Yeah, but apparently we tried this in 1965, and the tests were apparently really successful. I mean, it was the first generation missiles, and the flaws were noted, but it functioned well enough. And this is one of those really weird things. When it functioned really well, it was extremely easy to mount. The helicopter didn't require any specific modifications. You had the fittings for the pylons, and the actual gun sight, it wasn't fitted onto the helicopter. The pilot, or the gunner, he had it mounted to his chest. I haven't added the picture for that, unfortunately, but he basically had a giant ass metal piece on his chest with a gun sight on it, and that's how he aimed the missiles. It would be really cool if Gaijin would implement like a custom gunner model for it, if they add this to the game. But it's really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Like it's obviously, so this isn't just your generic Huey. There's obviously a lot to it, and as you said, the munitions that it has really sets it apart from others that we have in the game. And even though helicopter designs in general, it's not really stagnated recently, but it's just most countries just use a lot of the same stuff. It's kind of nice to see something which is a little bit original in the form of using these SS-10s. The next vehicle that is in the list is the Project Helicopter 8. So obviously you mentioned before about the project ideas. What sets this apart from some of the others we've seen before it?
Yeah, this is one of those helicopters which is, depending on who you ask, it's an opinion. It's either German or Swedish. This is the premium German CB2. Well, although it's not correctly modeled in game, it's meant to reflect this individual helicopter, and this is a single individual helicopter. This is not a version. This is a CB. I'm not sure specifically which version it is. It's apparently a CB something something. It was built in 1978 by MBB in Germany, and nothing is known about its 2 first years. There are some notes about it being tested for some missile trials, but it's the first photographs we have of it, and the first good information, that's in 1980 when it was trialed in Sweden. And according to my research, which I'm not going to explain because it's really long, it was modified for Swedish trials. So this was a request by the Swedish military. Hey, MBB, could you give us a Bo 105 with toes? Because that's what we want. That's what we want to trial. And they trialed a bunch of other helicopters as well, but this is like the only customized one to my knowledge. So basically, to our knowledge, this is a customized trial helicopter for Sweden. And it also has this Swedish camouflage, as you can see, which was not done in Germany. It was painted in Sweden, and apparently it was also modified in Sweden, but I don't know how. But the gun sight, that's the same gun sight you have on, for example, the British Lynx. That's a huge British ordnance something tow roof sight. The actual tow launchers are American M65 launchers. The white things, if you look at the picture right now above them, those are customized MBB pylons. And if you want to be really nosy about it, if you look at the tail, right under the tail rotor, you see a small logotype. That's the logotype for the Swedish trial service, Försökscentralen, FC, which was my first indication that they were involved in the development process of this thing. So this is one of those weird things where, it was built in Germany. It was for Swedish purposes. However, this is the second part of the story. It was only trialed in Sweden for about 8 months. It was trialed in Sweden for about a half a year, 6 months, and then it was trialed in Germany for a unknown time. The second part of 1981. And after that, the Swedish trials were over. The Bo 105 won the competition, and later we would sign a deal to buy Bo 105s, which would become the Helicopter 9. And after that, this individual became a demonstrator for MBB, as their tow version, because prior to this, MBB did not offer the Bow 105 with tows. They were part of the hot development, and that's what they wanted to sell. However, after the trial, they had this tow armed version on their hands, and they decided to try to make some money of that, because the tow was more widely used than the hot. So in 1981, the last part of 81, it became a demonstrator. In 82, it was shown at the Farnborough International Air Show, and apparently that was a big-ass flop. Nobody basically came to watch it, to my knowledge. No one was interested in buying it. It continued to be a demonstrator throughout 83. At the end of 83, it was modified into an LS version, which is basically like an unarmed crane version. In 84, it was yet again modified into a machine gun pod thing, a desert helicopter without a gun sight, so you can't load missiles on it. If you go down and look at pictures, the bottom pictures shows it in that gun pod desert configuration in 1984-85, and that's from the Le Bourget Paris Air Show. But what's really weird is that after the Le Bourget Paris Air Show, the helicopter was rented again by the Swedish army. Why they picked this specific individual, I don't know, because it is unarmed. It's, I don't know what they used it for. It was not painted in Swedish camouflage again. So they basically had it in this desert camouflage marked with the number 76 for a couple of years, and then they sent it back to MBB, and the rest of the history is not really relevant. So this is a really weird vehicle, because it is Swedish, but it is also arguably German, and it's already a premium in the German tree. But at the same time, we don't really have a lot to work with in the Swedish tree, so it's sort of needed to not make the tree super small.
I also think it's fine with having, similar vehicles in different trees. I mean, all you have to do is look at the amount of Apaches we have in game now, or, the amount of Cobras, which just cover everything. So the fact that this was in, it was in Swedish service technically, and also it had all of the other bells and whistles. There's obviously the fact that it carried all of the ATGMs. I think this will be a nice mainstay for the main tech tree, maybe something as kind of a middling helicopter. It would be interesting if they decide to put it in different configurations, even though generally it only seems that there are certain configurations that will be useful in the game. The next vehicle that we're having a look at is the Helicopter 9A. So this looks incredibly similar to the one that we have before. But what are the major differences between the one we just looked at and this 9A?
Yeah, well, depending on what type of CB version the Helicopter 8 is, this one might have stronger engines. Other visual differences are the camera and the camera mount. If you look at the Helicopter 8, it has a sort of streamlined, rounded gun sight platform. This one is very square. This is the same platform that you have on the German PAH-1, which is, it's a box with a box sight on top of it. However, the sight is a Saab Helitow sight, so it's partially American, but it's mainly a Swedish-developed sight, and it has night sight capabilities. There was also one individual who was modified with a FLIR sight, so wallhack sight. As for the armament system, it had Helitow systems, which are tow launchers. They are modified and apparently easier to aim than American equivalent systems. But I'm no expert on what that specifically means. But apparently these were very advanced for their time, and they were even purchased by Italy and used on their Mangusta attack helicopter. The Danish also bought them and used them on their Fenwick helicopters. So this is basically like a lighter armed version. However, it has access to much more advanced tow missiles compared to the Helicopter 8, because the Helicopter 8 was only used during the first tow era, maybe ITOW. However, this was used up until the 2000s, so you will have access to the full tow suite. For example, if you scroll down, I have a list of the missiles that you can load on this thing. You have the RB-55B, which is the ITO. You have the RB-55C, which is the TOW2. You have the RB-55D, which is the TOW2A. And then the most specific, unique of all is the RB-55E, which is the TOW2B. And the TOW2B is a top attack missile, like the RB-56 that you have on the new CV90 that they added last patch. So this is not a missile that you aim directly at a tank. It goes above the tank and blows a hole through the roof.
That would be a kind of cool mechanic to actually add. I mean, obviously we already have it, for the Swedish ground vehicles, but whenever a new tech tree comes in, you do want to try and give it a little bit of variation, depending, to other trees, just to kind of give people a reason to play them instead of just, another grind through. So that would be really cool to have that TOW2B. How about these machine guns that you have here? Would they be mounted with the launchers, or would these just be a separate idea?
Yeah, these use the same mounts as the missile system, so you would effectively be able to choose to have either just two machine guns or maybe one tow launcher and one machine gun. It's not nothing good, but it's at least an option if you would like to use machine gun pods. These are actually fairly good machine gun pods for all things considered. They use M3M machine guns, and the M3M machine guns has a high fire rate of 1,200 rounds per minute. So that's almost equivalent to the M3s on the Saber. So you will be able to shred helicopters if you get close enough. However, in the current meta, that's not really reliable. But who knows in the future? If you go up against an equivalent helicopter without, anti-air missiles, these machine gun pods will be really effective at dealing with other helicopters.
And it's also nice to always just have a few more options, even if those options are maybe not the best. The next helicopter we're having a look at looks like it's going to be the top tier one, and this is the AHS S95. Now, this obviously looks very similar to a bunch of helicopters already in previous tech trees that we have in the game. Tell us about this and what makes it different from some of its brothers.
Yeah, so this is the most controversial thing in the tree, I'd say. Basically, Sweden during the 1990s wanted to buy an attack helicopter when going into the 2000s, and we decided to trial the Apache and the Mi-28, which became available after the fall of the Soviet Union. So these were not in service. They were not even planned to be in service. These were just trial vehicles to get an understanding of how to use attack helicopters in Swedish, nature and tactics. So we ordered, or we hired two AH-64As from a USA European base stationed, I think, in Greece. I'm not really sure, but basically we hired two AH-64As for a couple of months just to trial them. Generally I would not see this as something worth having in the tree whatsoever. However, they were actually painted in Swedish green, and if you look at the picture, there is a Swedish roundel on the turbine thing. So at least they look Swedish, and sure, they're controversial. They were not in service. They were not intended to be in service, but it's the best thing we got, because Sweden does not have attack helicopters and have never used attack helicopters. So this is like the only thing that would be sort of viable, because the only other attack helicopter we have trialed is the Mi-28, but we didn't paint that thing, and that was just to see how good Russian tech was, really. Like, that was even less of a planned purchase.
So I'm guessing when it comes to it, this would have the similar armaments to the other AH-64As. Would there be anything different, or would it just be the same?
We only trialed it with standard armament, which was Hellfires and the FFRs. However, the Hellfire was already in Swedish service, as a, and still is, as an anti-ship missile. That's the RB-17, and apparently that has a version, or has it has a different warhead. It's not a heat warhead. It has a armor-piercing, high explosive warhead. Like you would generally have on an anti-ship weapon. And the idea was that we could use these things as anti-ship helicopters. So basically, you would fire APHE Hellfires at enemy boats. And I also heard from verbal conversations that the Swedish rocket pods, the Swedish design rocket pods, they were NATO compatible, and those could be fitted to these helicopters if they went into service, just to use up our rocket supplies, which were getting a bit old. So, I mean, if Guardian wants to go alternate history, this thing could get Swedish rocket pods, which would use fairly high caliber rockets, 135 millimeter rockets. However, I have no documentation if those were ever considered. I've just heard that it was possible to mount them and they would effectively function. So, yeah.
It would at least make it, I suppose, a little bit different. So maybe it at least should be considered when or if the Swedish helicopters get added. I'm sure this will be kind of the crowning jewel, unless they decide to go the Mi-28 route, as you talked about before. So that would be the tech tree. Obviously, when you look at helicopters across the board, this would actually be better than the Japanese tech tree we currently have. And also, I would actually liken it to very similar to, in effect, the German tech tree. So it just shows that there are options there. Obviously, as blockhaj has shown, there is a few caveats when it comes to some of these vehicles, but it is how it is. Sometimes you do have to make, sometimes you have to make a few exceptions in order to make the vehicles actually useful. The next part is blockhaj has also made a proposed premium helicopter a little bit, and I think generally when we have tech trees, you do have to consider the premium options as well. So let's have a look at them. The first one being the AS550 C2D AAS. So what is this one about blockhaj? What makes this different from the ones we've seen before?
Yeah, so this is a Danish helicopter. Basically, around the same time when Sweden bought the Bo 105s, which became the Helicopter 9, Saab launched the Helitow armament system, which included the tow launcher and the sight. And they launched that on the international market. And Denmark really liked it, so they decided to buy them, and it was already trialed on the Fanatical helicopter. So Denmark basically, they bought Fanatical helicopters and armed them with the Helitow system. However, the Helitow system was not fitted in Denmark. It was fitted by Saab in Sweden. So these are effectively Swedish built, if you will, but they were used by Denmark. But Denmark is, it's related to Sweden, so this I think would be a fairly nice premium. It's related to Sweden, and it's it's related to Sweden in more than one way, basically. And it's sort of an ideal premium, if you will. And it's also very similar to the HKP9 because it uses the same sight and the same weapon system, although the helicopter type is different. So this would be a nice transition, if you will, if this was available and you decide to buy it. And once you get up to the HKP9, for example, you would feel right at home.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of I've actually talked to a few Danish people, people like Silverbird and others, who have brought up the idea of having like the Danish Draken in the game, because it kind of had extra options when it comes to secondary armaments. So the idea of obviously merging well, not really merging, but just putting a few Danish vehicles in the Swedish tree, especially if they have connections as close to, this helicopter, I think would be, it would be completely fine. You could definitely make a justification for it. The next vehicle is the HKP-9A 09212, the Bastarden, and what is this vehicle about? What makes it different from some of the vehicles we've seen before?
Yeah, so now we're really pushing the limit of how we can stretch this. So this is, I mentioned earlier that we had one helicopter 9 with a FLIR sight. This is that one. This is the only known helicopter 9 sight. Well, at least it's said to be the only one. So, I haven't done some calculations here. It's just people say this is the only helicopter 9 with a FLIR sight. And because it is the only one with a FLIR sight, it was called Bastarden in Swedish. On the forum, that's just a bunch of X's because censor. But yeah, this is stretching it. I personally would like this to be an upgrade for the regular HKP-9 because a FLIR sight, it's really useful, and this was in service. Sure, we only used one, but we only had 20 helicopter 9, so the percentage is not that off really. So, but yeah, this is just pushing the envelope. This is, it's just an HKP-9 with a FLIR sight. That's it. That's just it. It has the same armament system, same flying characteristics, same everything, except it has a FLIR sight. So yeah, this is just trying to, show the full picture. However, I would prefer this personally to be an upgrade instead of an individual vehicle. However, you gotta show the options here.
And also, if you don't know what a FLIR sight is, it's a forward-looking infrared sight, and this one is a night sight. Just so you understand, the difference between this and the standard helicopter in the tech tree. And then the last vehicle, which I'm guessing is going to have a very similar story to the Apache at the top of the tree, the Mi-28A. So this, we're definitely mixing a bunch of countries together in this tech tree, which I think is fine, especially since you look at other tech trees and it's very similar. So what's going on with this one? How does this Mi-28 relate to Sweden?
Yeah, so this is basically the same story as the Apache. We wanted to trial attack helicopters, so we managed to rent a Havoc from the Russians, and this is it. And this was trialed against the Apache, and we all know how the story went. We never bought attack helicopters. However, if you still want to know some interesting stuff from this whole thing, this thing was considered pure garbage. Basically because only 7 out of 10 missiles or rockets actually worked. So we had a bunch of rockets. I think the missiles were actually fairly functional, but the rockets were not. Like a bunch of the rockets which were fired did not detonate upon impact. So the guys working on this project, they had to spend a heck of a long time just going through all of these rockets and disarming them safely. Also, it did not have dual controls, and that was sort of problematic during the trialing because we wanted to, have Swedish pilots pilot these vehicles to, gain experience, but that was not possible with this. So we had a Russian pilot piloting it, and then we had a Swedish guy, manning the turret or whatnot in the gunner seat. And the Russian guy did not understand English whatsoever. So you have basically had a translator on the ground who would constantly translate between the Swedish guy in the gunner seat and the Russian pilot. I've not heard that there were any, major problems about this. I think I also heard some guy commenting that the Russian guy was actually fairly nice, but it still took a lot of time to just, go through the conversation because you had to translate all the time. Between these two guys, and we're talking an armed gunship. This is not a time when you want to have translation problems. Because if you look at the picture, I mean, this is not a firing range really. This is in the middle of some Swedish village. I don't know. So this is not the type of place where you want misfires.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah, basically just flying about and over some farmland. It definitely doesn't look like a testing range. But it does say, at least here, when it comes to the weapons, that it would have the Sturm, the Attacker, and also the S8KO rocket. So with this, I'm guessing this was never trialed with any native weaponry, just the Russian weaponry that was available.
Yeah, no, this was not tried with any native weaponry, because this was never intended whatsoever to be a purchase. This was just to see what the Russians had going on. I mean, sure, if this thing functioned flawlessly and we could afford it, we might have bought it, but we never intended to buy it, even though alternate history can say other things. But yeah, this was never intended to be bought. It was never considered with Swedish weaponry in mind. So yeah, this would, if they decide to add this, which I really doubt, because it doesn't even have Swedish roundels on it. This is just a Russian helicopter we trial. It has Russian markings, Russian everything. So if they decide to buy this, this would be like the purest clone of clones that you would have in the game. Like, unless they decide to give it an historical Swedish skin. Some people might like that. I mean, it's cool, I guess. But this is clone territory all the way.
Yeah, it would definitely open up a lot of doors, I suppose. If what I've seen recently is because of a few decisions that have been made with different tech trees. It seems like now more than ever, people are pushing for different weird and wonderful vehicles because of certain, as I said, certain vehicles being added, meaning that it's opened up the doors for others. And I feel like an Mi-28A, which has been tested by Sweden. Now, this means that any Tom, Dick, and Harry with anything that was tested by any country could just, basically say, hey, well, we want this stuff in our tech tree too. But I mean, at the end of the day, as we said at the start, this is very much just kind of like a fact-finding mission, putting everything out there, showing what is available for Sweden. And I've got to say, obviously a lot of the conversations I've had previously have shed some light on some of these vehicles. But the fact that there is at least the basis here of a general helicopter tree, which is actually, well, in my opinion, functionally better and more interesting than the Japanese one, gives it legs, and hopefully we can see it be developed even further. And do you have any last comments that you want to make on the proposed tech tree, blockhaj?
Well, no additions really. I guess if you leave a link in the description, tech. I mean, I would recommend all of the people who watch this to go and check out the thread that I've made. Because, I mean, we didn't go over all of the things I have in this thread, and I actually have put a lot of, elbow grease into this, so I really want people to watch this. So if you have the time, go and watch the thread and read through what I have posted.
Of course, I agree, and we will make sure to leave the link in the description to the thread so you can get involved in the conversation, you can put your opinion in, and also just have a look over it. There is a lot of posts made on the forums, including this one with a lot of interesting information. Even if you disagree with the ideas, it's always nice to learn a little bit about history, and that's always been what has always been great for me when it comes to War Thunder. It's a mix of gameplay, it's a mixture of historical information, and it's a mixture of just a wonderful set of people, putting out their ideas into the ether. So it's nice to, it's wonderful that, we have the YouTube channel to be able to show you this stuff, and just like before, these are some of my favorite videos to do when it comes to actually looking at vehicles that we could see in the future. And I just want to thank blockhaj for putting this together, and also say, just like he did, make sure to check this out on the forum and go and enjoy it. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Battling Bacon, Blackie, Chris Giltnane, Conte Baraka, Daniel Stanton, Elove Goat, Jay Wilt, Martinez, Trigger Hippie, Universe, Eugens Terry, and also I'm Devilish and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.